Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, a new message from Savannah Guthrie as there is a second alleged ransom note deadline in the disappearance of her mother.
We believe our mom is still out there. We need your help.
The latest plea as the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie now enters its second week. The Guthrie family vowing to pay for their mother's return. Authorities back at her Tucson home this weekend, what they inspected and what they brought back. Lawmakers review the unredacted Jeffrey Epstein files, both parties demanding to know what's been withheld. It comes as Epstein's co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell pleads the fifth. Her attorney says there's one thing Maxwell needs from the president: to speak honestly. Tonight, our conversation with an Epstein survivor as this all plays out. It's the centerpiece of the Trump administration's economic agenda. Now, just how much a new report shows those tariffs are costing Americans. Losing a lifeline. Cuba's already crippled economy faces a new blow as they lose Venezuelan oil.
What does taking away Venezuelan oil mean for the country of Cuba?
A total collapse.
God bless America!
And it was a halftime show to remember, and a new team's on top after Super Bowl 60. We have all the highlights.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Lindsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with a new desperate plea from Savannah Guthrie as the search for her mother, Nancy Guthrie, now enters its second week. The family is facing a second deadline tonight per an alleged ransom note. Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in Tucson in the dark of night 8 days ago. Late today, Savannah Guthrie posted another video, this time making a direct appeal to the public, pleading with anyone, anywhere, with any possible information to come forward.
We believe our mom is still out there. We need your help. Law enforcement is working tirelessly around the clock trying to bring her home, trying to find her. She was taken and we don't know where. And we need your help. So I'm coming on just to ask you, not just for your prayers, but no matter where you are, even if you're far from Tucson, if you see anything, if you hear anything, if there's anything at all that seems strange to you, that you report to law enforcement. We are at an hour of desperation. And we need your help.
You can hear that desperation there. Authorities returned to Nancy Guthrie's home over the weekend, inspecting rooftop cameras, a septic tank, and going door to door. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings were told to pay millions by someone claiming to be her kidnapper. Over the weekend, they released a video saying, "We received your message and we understand, we will pay." Aaron Katersky leads us off once again from Tucson tonight.
Tonight, that new plea from Savannah Guthrie after an agonizing 8 days.
We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
The post coming just hours before a deadline to send millions in Bitcoin to someone claiming to be Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper. The FBI has been unable to determine whether the ransom demand is credible, but over the weekend, Savannah posted this solemn and cryptic message telling whoever abducted her mother in the dark of night she would pay without asking for proof her mother's alive.
We received your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay.
There have been two messages from the purported kidnapper that law enforcement sources told ABC News appear to have come from the same sender, using the same encryption tools to cover their tracks. But tonight, with the deadline now here, the Today host with a new message, and this time it's addressed not to a potential abductor, but to the public, an appeal for anyone to help.
The message that was released a few hours ago today is really not to the kidnappers, it's to the rest of us across this country to help her look for her mother.
Over the weekend, investigators returned to Nancy Guthrie's house, inspecting rooftop cameras, towing a car, and examining what appears to be a septic tank. FBI agents seen going door to door in her neighborhood. Investigators also returned to daughter Annie's house, where Nancy had dinner and game night before the family brought her home. This busy intersection is not far from where Nancy Guthrie lives, and as police search for useful video, they focused on cameras like this one, and police say they've gathered data from nearly every intersection like this across Tucson. And they're zeroing in on overnight hours when there wouldn't have been many cars on the road. Guthrie's quiet desert neighborhood would have been dark when police believe she was abducted, minimizing the effectiveness of home security cameras. Tonight, billboards are up in nearby states as the search grinds into its second week with no suspects and no new leads. At Nancy Guthrie's church, where members first alerted her family when she didn't show up for Sunday services, the congregation is keeping the faith.
We pray for protection over Nancy right now in this moment, in body, mind, and soul.
So many across the country continue to pray. Aaron Katersky joins us now once again from Arizona. Aaron, the family is clearly getting frustrated as this investigation stretches on. What's the latest that you can tell us from authorities?
You can hear that frustration in Savannah Guthrie's agonizing plea to the public for help, Lindsey. Investigators just moments ago said they do not have any new information to share. They do not have any new leads. They do not have suspects, no persons of interest, no vehicles connected to the case. This investigation grinding now into a second week with no evidence that Nancy Guthrie is still alive. Lindsey?
Just so heart-wrenching. Aaron, thank you. We move on now to breaking developments involving the Jeffrey Epstein files. Co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell appeared virtually before a House committee today, pleading the Fifth. Her attorney says Maxwell cannot speak honestly unless she first gets something from President Trump. We'll be joined by Jeffrey Epstein survivor Annie Farmer in a moment. But first, ABC's Rachel Scott reports from Capitol Hill.
Tonight, newly released videos showing Jeffrey Epstein's only convicted co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, appearing before lawmakers from a Texas prison, refusing to answer questions unless President Trump grants her clemency first.
I invoke my Fifth Amendment right to silence.
Maxwell, who is currently challenging her conviction and 20-year sentence for trafficking minors to Epstein, pleading the Fifth. Her lawyer stating she is prepared to speak fully and honestly if granted clemency by President Trump, adding both President Trump and President Clinton are innocent of any wrongdoing. Ms. Maxwell alone can explain why. President Trump, who was friends with Epstein for more than 2 decades, has not ruled out a pardon for Maxwell. Today, the House Oversight Committee's top Republican warning against it.
She's asked for clemency from the president, so I personally don't think she should be granted any type of immunity or clemency.
Democrats arguing Maxwell is playing Trump.
This was an effort to essentially try to secure her pardon by keeping her mouth shut.
The fallout from the more than 3 million pages of Epstein files released by the Justice Department late last month still growing. Democrats and at least one Republican now calling on Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to resign. Lutnick insisted he distanced himself from Epstein in 2005, even calling him gross on a podcast last fall.
I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
But files released by the DOJ show the two were still in contact. This email showing an appointment for drinks in 2011, years after Epstein first pleaded guilty to sex crimes. R.J. O'Brien asking if the committee plans to subpoena Lutnick.
Interested in talking to anyone that might have any information that would help us get justice for the survivors.
Our thanks to Rachel Scott, and we're so grateful to be joined by Jeffrey Epstein survivor Annie Farmer. Annie, thank you so much for taking the time to come back on the show. As you know, members of Congress got a chance to view the files in an unredacted setting today. Here's part of what Republican Thomas Massie had to say after that.
We went in there for 2 hours. There's millions of files, right? And in a couple of hours, we found 6 men whose names have been redacted who are implicated in the way that the files are presented.
What's your reaction to that, Annie?
It sounds like the DOJ is continuing to do the one thing that they're not supposed to be doing, which is impeding transparency, right? It was very clear the way this law was written, and perpetrators were not supposed to be protected, and we see that continuing to happen, and I'm glad to hear lawmakers standing up and saying that's not okay.
Do you have anything in particular that you want members of Congress to be looking for or telling you after viewing the unredacted files?
I think many of us have been poring over the files ourselves and are finding places where there are redactions that seem to be problematic and are communicating those to them. I know in one example, there appears to be a reference to my sister Maria Farmer's 1996 report, and there's a few lines that signal that that's what it's about, and then there's a lot of blocked text. So what is the explanation for that? One of the central questions we have is, why was nothing done with that report in 1996 to prevent the abuse of so many? So I think that's a great example of the kind of thing we want more information about that we should be able to see.
Ghislaine Maxwell, as you know, pleaded the Fifth today at a congressional hearing again and again. Take a listen to just one of those instances.
Ms. Maxwell, have you ever coerced, directed, or otherwise instructed any young woman or girl to provide sexual favors to Mr. Epstein or any other individual?
I invoke my Fifth Amendment right to silence.
As her lawyer continues to press for clemency in exchange for her testimony, something President Trump has continually declined to rule out, how does this all make you feel?
It's honestly very disturbing to see these images of her and have her be looked at as someone who could potentially be providing any kind of information in this case. I mean, she has refused over and over to cooperate with the investigation. She's refused to have, she doesn't have any empathy or has not expressed any empathy or remorse to her victims. So I think it's highly problematic that anyone would consider negotiating with a serious criminal like this. And I think it would just really be indicative of guilt in some way, because we know that she is not a credible source of information.
And you say to her victims, as you know, she has repeatedly said that she had no involvement directly with actually abuse.
Yeah, I can speak, very personally to the fact that that's not true. She was abusive towards me, and there's so many other crimes that she committed that she wasn't even prosecuted for. There were 4 of us that testified at her trial, but I have now met so many women who say it was because of Ghislaine Maxwell that I ended up being abused, sometimes for years, and that she was at times involved in that abuse herself. So she was a very central figure in this system, and her efforts to minimize her role have not been effective. We've seen in the files that have been released already several places where the emails she sent are contradictory to things she said on the record before about knowing Virginia Roberts Giuffre, for example, about the photo of her with Andrew Windsor. And so I think the more information we have, the more clear it is that she is not a credible source of information.
I want to go back to Bimi because, as I was mentioning, as these files have been released, some have pointed to the fact that there are these redactions on emails that appear not to identify others who were associated with Epstein. But in the days, as you know, after the files were released, names of the victims at times were briefly brought out publicly before then being taken down. How do you and the tight-knit group of survivors feel about this?
Yeah, that was a really upsetting piece of this process for us. I think we had tried to prepare ourselves that there would be potentially places where some identifying information could slip out because of the number of files, right? But then to see just whole sections of names of victims completely unredacted, I know my own date of birth and phone number was released, but that was true for so many people. And then even more upsetting, was the fact that there were images, nude photographs of girls and young women that were also released by our own DOJ. So, I think when Pam Bondi is before the Judiciary Committee this Wednesday, I really want people to press her on this process and how this could have possibly happened, because that is not that is huge. That is really, really problematic that they allowed this to happen.
You were part of a PSA released on Super Bowl Sunday pushing for accountability and justice. Do you have a message for President Trump tonight about what you want him to do next?
I want Trump to follow the law, to make sure that his DOJ follows the law. I want to make sure that that means full transparency in this case, which would just be redacting the survivors' names while not redacting and protecting the people who harmed us, and promising that he will not provide clemency to Ghislaine Maxwell would be an important step in that process as well.
Annie Farmer, we thank you so much for your time and talking with us again.
Thank you so much for having me.
The release of more documents from the Epstein files is as much headline news in the UK as it is here because of former Prince Andrew's involvement with Epstein. For more now, let's go to Tom Suvi-Burge in London. Tom?
Yeah, Lindsay, the pressure on Andrew rising further. An email in the Epstein files suggests the former prince forwarded government documents to Jeffrey Epstein in 2010 when Epstein was already a convicted sex offender. The documents were reports about trips the then Duke of York made as a UK government trade envoy. Now, an anti-monarchy group in the UK says it has reported Andrew to UK police for suspected misconduct in public office. No comment from Andrew, but police saying they are, quote, assessing the information. The Prince and Princess of Wales reacting to these new allegations as William begins a visit to Saudi Arabia. A spokesperson for William and Kate saying they have been, quote, deeply concerned by the continuing revelations and their thoughts remain focused on Epstein's victims. King Charles also issuing a statement via his spokesperson expressing the King's, quote, profound concern at allegations which continue to come to light, saying the specific claims are for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he's now known to address, but the King's spokesperson adding, quote, if we are approached by police, we stand ready to support them, as you would expect. King Charles on a visit today was heckled by one man standing in the crowd as questions swirl about what the royal family knew about Andrew's conduct and when, Lindsay.
Thank you, Tom. President Trump's tariffs may have cost the average American household $1,000 last year. That's according to new research from the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation. The study also shows that Trump's tariffs were the, quote, largest U.S. tax increase as a percent of GDP since 1993. In a statement to ABC News, the White House officials pushed back and said costs such as wages and investments have soared thanks to the average tariff rate increase. James Pierce Jr., the star rookie linebacker for the Atlanta Falcons, is under arrest tonight and facing charges after being accused of leading police on a high-speed chase following an alleged domestic dispute with his ex-girlfriend, a player in the WNBA. Here's Stephanie Ramos.
Tonight, the dramatic police takedown. New video showing officers in South Florida trying to arrest Atlanta Falcons star James Pierce Jr. after authorities say he led them on a chase following a domestic dispute with a WNBA star. Pierce, a first-round pick in the 2025 draft, now facing multiple charges, including aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. Pierce seen leaving jail Sunday with his lawyers after posting bond. According to the affidavit, Los Angeles Sparks player Rickea Jackson told police Pierce intentionally collided with her car twice on Saturday outside Miami. Jackson stating she and Pierce had recently ended their relationship after dating for about 3 years. Authorities say Pierce hit an officer with his SUV and fled the scene. He later crashed his vehicle and after a short struggle was taken into custody. A judge ordering Pierce to stay at least 500 feet from Jackson at all times.
Yes, Judge, I understand.
Our thanks to Stephanie. In Hong Kong today, a court sentenced pro-democracy media mogul Jimmy Lai to 20 years in prison. The 78-year-old billionaire and fierce critic of China was arrested and charged under a sweeping national security law Beijing imposed on the city. ABC's Britt Clennett has the latest from Hong Kong.
Lindsay, 20 years for one of China's most prominent critics. A court here in Hong Kong handing down the harshest sentence under the national security law since Beijing introduced it as part of sweeping crackdowns in 2020. Now, Lai's family, they have been worried that the 78-year-old would actually die in prison. And given his age, he's got health issues, and this 20-year penalty, there is now a real chance that may happen. It was a very tense morning at the court with a very heavy police presence. Lai's wife, Teresa, she walked out of the court holding back tears behind her large glasses after seeing her husband in the dock expressionless as he received that sentence. Now, Jimmy Lai, he is a UK citizen, and his son Sebastian is really hoping that now that the case has worked its way through the Hong Kong judicial system, that China may actually release his father as a way to kind of appease the UK and the US, especially ahead of President Donald Trump's scheduled visit to China in April. Sebastian Lai telling me many Americans would resonate with what his dad did, standing up for freedom and defending his people. Lindsay.
Britt, thank you. Coming up, Seattle was super, but can they repeat? Coach Herm Edwards is here to break down the game and tell us whether the Seahawks can return to the Super Bowl. Plus, Bad Bunny brings it. The Puerto Rican superstar leans into his heritage for a historic halftime show. What his performance means for America. Next. Welcome back, everyone. If you missed the Super Bowl and Bad Bunny's halftime show, then you probably found yourself desperate to try to catch up today, since it's all many people seem to want to talk about, and which is why the game and the music are tonight's By the Numbers. It would have been the Patriots' 7th Super Bowl victory, but it was not meant to be. In their 29-13 loss for the Seahawks, it was their 2nd championship. Their other win came in 2014. Each Seahawks player will now receive $178,000, and each Patriot $103,000. Chump change, though, considering the average NFL salary is about $5 million. There were 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round of the 2018 NFL Draft, and now 4 of them have led their teams to the playoffs and have reached the Pro Bowl. Those 4 are Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and now Sam Darnold. Turning to the halftime show, following Bad Bunny's 13-minute Sonic extravaganza, his music saw a 470% increase in U.S. streams on Spotify. Benito's surprise guests also saw big upticks as well. Streams of Ricky Martin spiked 145% in the U.S. following the performance. And finally, those tall stalks of grass that you saw during halftime, it took 380 extras in costume to achieve the effect designed to look like Bad Bunny's hometown in Puerto Rico. The Puerto Rican superstar leaned into his heritage for the halftime show, performed almost entirely in Spanish with a powerful message of unity, shouting out "God bless America" before naming the dozens of countries across the Americas.
God bless America. Sea Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Brasil, Colombia.
LA Times editor Susie Exposito joins us now to talk about the Benito Bowl. Thank you so much for coming on. All right, so give us your take. What did you think of Bad Bunny's performance?
Whew. I mean, I think it can be summed up in one word, and that is sazon. He brought Puerto Rican flavor. He brought a level of artistic excellence to the Super Bowl that cannot be replicated. And he did it while showing love to Latino culture, not just in Puerto Rico, but well beyond.
There was a lot of controversy, as you know, in the run-up to the performance. How do you think the NFL and also Bad Bunny handled that?
I think they handled it very elegantly. You know, there was no negativity. It was very empowering, and it was very just full of love and compassion for Latinos. And the truth is that the NFL, you know, their mission has been to expand its reach beyond the United States. I mean, they've hosted games in the UK and Brazil. And I think that by hosting a Spanish language superstar whose popularity is now on par with Taylor Swift and Beyonce, I think they certainly fulfilled their mission.
In the space of just 7 days, Bad Bunny won a Grammy and then performed at the Super Bowl. Has any artist ever had a bigger week?
I'm not sure. I mean, geez, this guy loves making history, doesn't he? You know, his winning streak, it just proves, you know, time and time again that he's a force to be reckoned with. Like he, I don't know, he just can't stop winning. It's incredible to see.
How do you think that last night's show shifted culture in America?
I think that Bad Bunny's job was not just to perform the hits, but to represent Puerto Rico to the rest of the world, you know, and he did it in a very, you know, very, very clever ways, especially just taking it, I mean, starting from the roots of Puerto Rico, you know, seeing the people in the sugarcane fields and, you know, dancing to rhythms that people have been dancing to for centuries. And these rhythms, you know, like Bomba y Plena, like they course through his music. And I got chills watching it, you know, and it wasn't just to, he wasn't just there to represent the brilliance and the innovation of the Puerto Rican people, but also to extend solidarity to other Latinos and credit Latinos in the shaping of America. Also with that fabulous procession of flags from across the Americas, he showed us that America is not just one country. It's not just the United States. And being American cannot be summed up into one singular experience.
All right, Susie Exposito, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
For more on the game itself and the Seahawks' dominating win, it is time for a special edition of Hanging with Herm with ESPN analyst Herm Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us, Coach. You correctly predicted the Seahawks would beat the Patriots. What was your reaction to how the game played out? Were you surprised that it seemed like the Seahawks did it so handily?
No, they dominated them, and they dominated them in the trenches. Defensively, they had no answer for that front four when it came back to Drake May trying to protect Drake May as a passer. But also their offensive line, Seattle's offensive line, had their way with the Patriots' defensive line and were able to run the football. So they dictated the terms of the game. I mean, as much as we love football and we want to watch the ball being thrown and guys catch the ball and all these other things, it starts up front. And they were just a dominant football team, very physical, and they just owned the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball.
Yeah,
Seattle.
as you say, the Seattle defense just had an incredible game. And we've seen some phenomenal defensive performances in past Super Bowls. But where do you think that Seattle's defense ranks among those?
Oh, it's the top five. You know, I'm a little older, so I can still remember the Steelers back in the day. They were pretty good, too. And, you know, and it's kind of funny because this is Super Bowl 60. And I was fortunate enough to play in Super Bowl 15, believe it or not. So there's been a lot of Super Bowls, and sometimes we lose sight of it. I know you were talking earlier, and I'm getting off subject, but I have to mention this for sure. The halftime show was really unique in the sense of the artistry and how they put that thing together. This guy is a fabulous dancer, but I will say this. He still hasn't topped the #1 show at halftime.
Oh, what
in the
was
NFL.
that? All right. What do you say, Coach? What was your favorite?
It's real simple. Michael Jackson.
All right. I mean, it is hard to top Michael Jackson.
No, hey, you can't top that one.
I'm with you on that. But looking ahead to next season, Super Bowl 61 in Los Angeles. Who are your very early favorites to reach the game? I know it's early, but I know you also have your thoughts.
It's early. I do believe this, and I said it earlier this year. The best division was the NFC West. When you think about the Rams, Seattle, and the San Francisco 49ers. It wouldn't surprise me if one of those teams show up again. And the AFC side of it, I just think it's wide open. I don't know if New England can repeat. That's very difficult to do. That division will be better. I think the Buffalo Bills have to improve some personnel so they can compete with the Patriots. But this is what makes the Super Bowl so unique. Remember this. The 2 Super Bowl participants this year didn't even make the playoffs last year. They were not in the playoffs. Seattle or obviously the Patriots were not in the playoffs last year. And they found themselves in the Super Bowl.
But what do you make of the Patriots had such a young quarterback, right? And so now he's going to have 1 Super Bowl under his belt, get his jitters out. Next year?
Well, they got to improve the offensive line. Did you see, you know, he got sacked in playoff competition 20 times. 20. And did you see the way he got beat up against Seattle? They've got to improve that. They've got to give him better protection. They will. That will be the #1 thing on the list for the New England Patriots. Look, they're a competitive group. They got a fabulous head coach. They will be in the runnings. There's no doubt about that.
Coach, I can't wait for next season just to have Hanging with Herm back on the show. I'm about to go through withdrawal, Coach.
I am as well. We get a little time off now.
All right. We thank you so much all season being with us. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
And our Rich Johnson got a chance to sit down with both Sam Darnold and Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker in Disneyland to talk about reaching such a career pinnacle. Let's take a look.
This is what kids dream about, right? I mean, how does the dream match up to the reality of the moment now?
Yeah, honestly, when it hit me is when they showed me the running backs that were the MVP.
A long list of Hall of Famers.
Yeah. So it meant a lot to me to be able to be on that list with those guys and, you know, the greats. So it's a blessing to be able to be in that position.
You can see the full interview with both Seahawks stars tomorrow morning on Good Morning America, starting at 7 a.m. on ABC. And we want to remind our viewers that Super Bowl 61 in Los Angeles will air right here on ABC and ESPN in 2027. Coming up, Lyft introduces a new feature to safely allow teenagers to request their own rides. And we look at Cuba's uncertain future as the island grapples with oil shipments from Venezuela that have been stopped after pressure from the United States. Welcome back to Prime. Here's a look at the stories making headlines right now. Savannah Guthrie posted a new video to social media asking for the public's help in bringing her mother home. This comes as the search for Nancy Guthrie now stretches into its 9th day. Investigators are concerned as a second deadline passes for a Bitcoin ransom to be paid to someone claiming to be her kidnapper. A Trump administration cabinet member remains under fire for his relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said that he distanced himself from Epstein a decade ago, but files show the two were in contact as recently as 2018. Today, Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell invoked her Fifth Amendment rights while appearing virtually from prison before the House Oversight Committee. And beginning today, lawmakers on the Hill beyond that committee will now get the chance to see millions of documents related to Epstein without any redactions. Actress Catherine O'Hara's cause of death has been released, showing that she died of a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in the lungs. Rectal cancer was listed on her death certificate as the underlying cause of death. O'Hara was just 71. Coming up, without humanitarian aid from countries like Venezuela, is Cuba's economic collapse imminent? Some experts now say yes. And did you catch the Ring Doorbell Super Bowl commercial advertising its search party featuring features to track down missing pets? The privacy concerns that's now raising. Welcome back, everyone. For years, Cuba's ally, Venezuela, provided the small island nation with nearly half of its oil, a small lifeline for an already crippled economy. With the arrest and U.S. indictment of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and with pressure from the U.S., oil shipments to Cuba have now stopped. Today, Cuba warned international airlines that they will no longer be able to supply planes with jet fuel for at least a month. With rolling blackouts across Cuba, questions remain: how will Cuba survive without the aid of oil from Venezuela or other countries and stave off a humanitarian crisis? Here's ABC's Matt Rivers.
Havana, Cuba. The country's communist government has been plagued with problems over its 6 decades in power, many of its own making. Corruption, aging infrastructure, hurricanes, a struggling economy, international isolation, all pushing today's Cuba to the brink of a humanitarian crisis, and often leaving the island's streets blanketed in darkness. Blackouts, some lasting nearly all day, a common occurrence now. Using only the light of her phone, Idaña Acosta pours water from a bucket into a small pot for her family's daily needs. The water, used to cook, bathe, and drink, will have to last Idaña, her 2 children, and her ailing mother until the next shipment comes in 10 days.
Los niños están, por supuesto, sin comer, llegan de la escuela, mamá, que hambre, no sé cuánto, hay que esperar a que venga la corriente.
Unión Eléctrica recorded that 60 to 70% of the island went without electricity in December after a nationwide blackout left around 10 million Cubans without power for several days. Families like the Acostas work and eat by candlelight as the city softly hums with overworked generators. When the power grid doesn't work, only those lucky enough to have generators and enough gas to run them can keep the lights on. And the situation is only expected to get worse.
Es bastante complicado el tema del apagón. Cada día todo peor. Y si no hay una ayuda, aunque sea el petróleo, que es lo que más a nosotros nos favorece, es todo más para atrás y más difícil.
Cuba's already crippled economy is expected to get even weaker after U.S. forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife early last month. The island nation depended on the oil Venezuela sent over, which according to experts accounted for nearly 50% of their daily oil demand. In exchange, the Cuban government provided personal security and intelligence for the Venezuelan president. But President Trump cutting off that lifeline, writing on social media there would be, quote, no more oil or money going to Cuba.
Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they can hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela.
Cuba faces tough questions here. I just don't see the country being able to survive without Venezuelan oil.
Jorge Piñón, a senior Energy Institute researcher at the University of Texas, tells ABC News Cuba's economic collapse is imminent.
we don't see a light at the end of this tunnel.
What does taking away Venezuelan oil mean for the country of Cuba?
A total collapse. When you're short diesel, now you're talking about transport. You're talking about diesel for the tractors and agricultures. Now this really impacts the economy of the country.
89% of Cuban households live in extreme poverty, according to the Cuban Observatory of Human Rights, with the average Cuban making just $16 per month. The Cuban economy has greatly suffered under a decades-long U.S. trade embargo that its government claims impeded its ability to do business on the world market. The regime brings in very little hard currency, so Cuba's international trade relies heavily on bartering, swapping its key exports like sugar, nickel, and medical services for essential imports such as oil, machinery, and food, with allies like Mexico, Venezuela, Russia, and China.
Where are their historical allies and exporters? I am very surprised that we haven't seen more Russian oil coming into Cuba. Brazil is now a major exporter of oil. So where is Lula coming to the aid of Cuba?
In January, President Trump declared a national emergency over what he called the, quote, unusual and extraordinary threat posed by Cuba, authorizing the U.S. to impose new tariffs on imports from countries that directly or indirectly supply oil to the island, meaning Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's attempts to include oil in their humanitarian assistance will come to a halt. There have not been any known oil tankers heading there from Mexico since January 9th, according to Piñón. Dr. Maria de Los Angeles Torres, a professor of Latin American and Latino studies at the University of Illinois, calls the situation unprecedented.
It's almost like it is a society that is structured right now on matchsticks, and any one little thing that gets taken out or anything that gets turned on a flame can go in a minute.
This would not be the first time the United States has intervened in Cuba. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy approved the ultimately unsuccessful plan for the CIA to overthrow Cuban leader Fidel Castro, known as the Bay of Pigs invasion.
My sincere feeling to the people of the United States. I hope in the future we will understand better and we will be friends.
Nearly 65 years later, attempting regime change in Cuba would be a personal victory for a key member of the Trump administration, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a Cuban-American and self-proclaimed son of exiles. His parents immigrated to the U.S. in the 1950s, settling in Miami, the beating heart of the Cuban exile community and decidedly anti-communist. The fate of Cuba is deeply personal to Rubio, who rejects the idea that the U.S. embargo was the cause of the island's economic malaise.
We would love to see the regime there change. The suffering in the rural areas of Cuba are acute and they're deep. And it's not because of the embargo, it's because they don't know how to run an economy.
Do you see Rubio's hand guiding a lot of these actions?
We have a very unpredictable president. And while Rubio may have a very coherent perspective on Cuba, we don't know how that unfolds. I think that the regime in its current form, without any outside aid from anyone else, that would include China and Russia, does not survive the year.
The Trump administration not ruling out regime change in Cuba after the abduction of Maduro, demanding on social media that the Cubans cut a deal, quote, before it's too late. Meanwhile, Cubans wait with bated breath, the fate of their island held in the balance. The Cubans are not simply waiting for someone to, quote, save them. Despite the heavy hand of a security state that stifles dissent, sporadic protests continue to pop up against the government, none bigger than in July 2021, when tens of thousands took to the streets across the country demanding better living and economic conditions. Thousands more were detained, and rights groups say hundreds remain behind bars.
I think most people in Cuba, like most people everywhere in the world, are interested in being able to get up in the morning, know that they have a job, that they can work and make a living, be able to bring food home. Cubans, I don't think, are different than that.
Last week, the U.S. announced they will provide $6 million in humanitarian assistance comprised of food and hygiene kits, Overnight, Mexico sending humanitarian aid as well. But the UN warns the humanitarian crisis will become even more severe if oil needs go unmet. Like the other 11 million inhabitants on the island, Idaña and her family are being pushed to the brink. But in a country where darkness is routine, life doesn't stop.
The options are so few. Our thanks to Matt for that story. Coming up, why a Super Bowl ad about finding lost dogs is sparking major privacy concerns. Details coming up in the rundown. ChatGPT will soon look a lot different. Major blowback for a Super Bowl ad at a lobster trap saves a surfer. These stories and more in tonight's rundown. Picket lines and posters are on full display after San Francisco's teachers went on strike today. They were hoping weekend talks would end with an agreement, but walked off after negotiations stalled over wages and funding family health care coverage.
It has taken over 10 months of sounding this alarm, negotiating, asking nicely, and hearing unfulfilled promises to get to this point.
More than 5,000 teachers, school nurses, aides, and other school employees work for the San Francisco Unified School District. Starting today, when you ask ChatGPT a question, your answer may come with an ad. Parent company OpenAI's change to its wildly popular chatbot will affect users in the U.S. who have a free account or a low-cost Go subscription. OpenAI says it will not provide advertisers with content from your conversations, but the ads will be on topic. For example, showing someone asking for recipes an ad for a grocery service below the answer. Instant messaging and social platform Discord says it's rolling out age verification starting next month. Discord users will need to be confirmed as adults to unblur sensitive content and easily see messages from strangers. Users will have to either submit to a facial scan for age estimation or provide a photo ID. If a user does not comply with age verification, the account will default to teen settings.
Pets are family, but every year, 10 million go missing.
A new feature from Amazon's Ring doorbell is sparking privacy concerns. In this Super Bowl ad, Ring says you can alert your neighbors to a missing pet, and other Ring cameras in the area will look for it. But critics online have an issue with the implications of this feature, with some worried it could be used for mass surveillance. Others called the ad creepy, concerning, and invasive. While law enforcement can already request your Ring's footage with a warrant, you can disable the lost pet feature. Rideshare app Lyft is launching a new feature aimed at helping kids get to school. The company says it will allow students 13 to 17 to request their own rides and get drivers that meet safety requirements. The Lyft CEO spoke with our Diane Macedo.
So the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a text as a parent from the driver saying, my name is so-and-so, I'm going to be the one picking up your teen. And of course, you can communicate back and forth that way. Second of all, your teen's going to get in the car, but they're going to have to enter a PIN to make sure that it's the right car. Third of all, you're going to have things like audio recording and one-touch ADT access and live tracking for your teen. So if you want to, you know exactly where your teen is when they're getting in the car and when they're getting out of the car.
And a California surfer swept out to sea by powerful waves survived by clinging to a lobster pot buoy. The Santa Barbara County Fire Department immediately sent up drones with infrared cameras, spotting the man about a quarter of a mile offshore without his surfboard, held up by that lobster pot float. A rescue team swam out and escorted him back to shore. And now for a short clip from tonight's All Access, where we sit down with Grammy Award-winning artist Kelly Rowland to discuss her career spanning nearly 3 decades. The former Destiny's Child member is now a wife and mother to 2 boys. Kelly reflected back on what it was like to lose her mom, Doris, just 3 weeks after giving birth to her first child.
Becoming a mother and losing your own is, I didn't think that I could get through that. To be honest, but I'm grateful to have such wonderful, strong mothers next to me in my community. Strong women helped me get through that. Whether they were mothers or not, to be honest, whether it was to pat me on my back, to let me cry, to let me grieve.
The full All Access with Kelly Rowland is now streaming on Hulu and Disney+. And we're hearing from American skier Lindsey Vonn for the first time since a heartbreaking crash ended her Olympic comeback. Vonn posted on social media today that she broke her leg in Sunday's crash. The injury will require multiple surgeries. She did not address her future plans or whether she is finished with competitive skiing. ABC's Maggie Rulli has more from the Olympics in Italy.
From an Italian hospital tonight, Lindsey Vonn speaking out for the first time, addressing her heartbreaking and dramatic crash during her highly anticipated comeback. All eyes were on Vonn Saturday, but a mere 13 seconds into her downhill race, you can see here her pole hitting the gate. Vonn racing on a torn ACL, airlifted off the mountain, later undergoing surgery for a fracture in her leg. The 41-year-old out of retirement and racing in her fourth Olympics, posting on Instagram, "Olympic dream did not finish the way I dreamt it would. It wasn't a storybook ending or a fairy tale. It was just life." Adding, "My ACL and past injuries had nothing to do with my crash whatsoever." Vonn, who didn't address any future plans, says, "Similar to ski racing, we take risks in life. We dream, we love, we jump, and sometimes we fall. Sometimes our hearts are broken. Sometimes we don't achieve the dreams we know we could have. But that is also the beauty of life. We can try. I tried, I dreamt, I jumped."
And she gave it her all. Our thanks to Maggie Rulli for that. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Lindsay Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.